Welcome to From Nowhere to Nothing, Ontological Oxymorons. I'm your host, Joel Bouchard, a doctoral student in psychology, and with me today is Dr. Foojan Zeine, a psychotherapist, speaker, author, and fellow podcaster. Much of our modern conception of the world is shaped by our scientific knowledge, which in turn is shaped by our philosophical beliefs. A philosopher who has had an immense impact on the way we conduct science is René Descartes, whose Cartesian dualism has led to split reductionist views of much of the world throughout history. But are the splits we create real or imagined? Perhaps more importantly, are they helpful or harmful? Today, we're talking about dualities. All right, Dr. Zeine, thanks for being on the show. What do you want to tell the listeners about yourself?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. When you were when I was hearing you, I'm like, we all kind of are philosophers anyway. So we look at the world and we actually bring whatever is out there as any type of data or information and shift it into our viewpoint. And our viewpoint is constantly making our philosophy. So when you said it, I'm like, yeah, we are all philosophers. So I could say I'm a philosopher, a psychotherapist. And I've been a psychotherapist and a coach for over 30 years. I've immigrated to the United States when I was 12 from Iran and kind of raised myself and went to school. And obviously, I think that when you talk about every therapist, there was a part of themselves that they wanted to heal. A trauma they wanted to heal. So we started this path kind of working on ourselves. And, I learned all the theories that were out there. I'm very curious about the mind of a human being. And out of all the beautiful, wonderful theories that are out there, I kind of picked the best part of them that I really saw in the sessions work and brought them together as an open structure, which is called awareness integration theory, which we use it from a therapeutic perspective, but also we have taken it into an educational model. And right now we're teaching it in daycare and we're finding astonishing results. We're doing research. I'm teaching it in Cal State Long Beach right now for the college students, and we're planning to take it to junior high and pretty much from 0 to 12K. So that brings the educational aspect of it, and then obviously the psychotherapy models of it. And the app is out this week. So people, if you're interested, go to Foojan app for Apple and Android. And it's an open structure model, which takes the cognitives, it takes the emotional, behavioral, mind-body, trauma-informed, solution-focused, all of those, and brings it together and creates kind of what I call it a brief but very in-depth personal work that you could do with yourself. And we do it in every area of life. So we've had astonishing results of minimizing depression around 75% and anxiety about 64% and raising self-esteem and self-efficacy. So I'm excited about the awareness integration. We're teaching therapists and coaches. We're certifying them. And that's what I'm working on, and I'm excited about it. And I'd love to share with you guys.
Yeah, no, that sounds super interesting. I can't wait to, I'm definitely going to look at the app. When we're off the air, if you want to point me in the direction where I can learn some more about your theory, I'd definitely be interested in it. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it today. Like you said, that's a big thing that we believe in on the show is that everybody is a philosopher. And we've talked about all kinds of stuff from, God and time and these big topics down to Disney princesses and things, right? Because essentially at its core, right, philosophy is taking any topic and asking those big questions about it. And psychology is certainly one of those. And, behind every psychological theory, there's a philosophy, right? If you have a behavioralist or a mechanical view of psychology, then you're sort of looking at the human as a machine. So they're kind of passive. You have either genetics or you have stimulus response things that cause you to act in a certain way that is almost deterministic. It's outside of your volition. And then you have all the way on the other end of the spectrum, you have, different ones that look at stages or, the more modern conceptions try to integrate these things more than separating them. But, philosophy, psychology, they go well together. Do you want to give the listeners an overview of what duality is from your perspective?
Of course. I think that duality coming from the two different parts where could be complementary with each other or could be an opposite of each other. And from a human place, we could look at it as the minute you are born, you have this duality between your needs and the needs of your surrounding and the world. And these two are consistently at times coming together and uniting, and at times completely separate. And I think when the dualities unite, we no longer call them dualities because they're coming together in somewhere. So they somehow negotiate together and come in together. But as long as they're not united, they're still separate and somehow come in grips with each other consistently. And we find ourselves falling from one end to the other. And you can see that from childhood going into teenagehood, and every stage of life brings a different aspect of ourselves, which is different with us and the world. So as we grow, I think that our dualities become much more complex because our needs become much more complex, and the way and the roles we take on is much more complex, right? So we become a student to a teacher. We become, we're a daughter to a mother, a daughter to a father. In these roles, each person in this relationship has different needs, and they're constantly coming together. And then you have it with nature, and you have it with the determinism of not only what you like and how you negotiate, but Joel, some things are just not negotiable. Like aging, you think you could negotiate with it. Death is really not negotiable. So there are aspects of life that you like to negotiate, but you can't. So also the determinism of, yes, I am a human being with particular restrictions. I cannot fly. I can get a plane, but I cannot fly. It doesn't matter how much I think I want to. So these are all the things that I think we come to grips with every aspect of our life, and how much these dualities, as we bring them and integrate them and bring them into a wholeness, will create kind of like mental health for us. And as long as they are opposite of each other and we find ourselves falling from one extreme to the other, it can be detrimental, such as like addiction. I've worked with addiction for 30 some years. I think of myself as an addict. I started with oral fixation of, sucking my thumb when I was little, and then it turned into cigarettes. And then, I finally quit cigarettes after 30 some years, and then it turned into food, sugar, and fat. Yes, because I knew I was an addict, and I had a, alcoholic father, and, my siblings were, I wasn't going to go around drugs because I knew I was going to take them and I'm just never going to leave them. What I did with cigarette was enough. But even as I have stopped it, I can see this duality. And since I work with my clients, you can see this completely the duality it is between the two parts that are constantly going from one extreme to another. And it seems like we either have to come to terms knowing and becoming aware, and in some aspects integrating, or we're in a war with ourselves and other people consistently. And I see some of the misery that we create for ourselves and then therefore for other people around us in different types of relationships, is that we are not aware of these dualities, although they're consistently at us, within us, and working through us.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of interesting things that you said there. One of them is that I think, when most people think about dualities, I think they think of sort of polar opposites, some things that are diametrically opposed. But like you mentioned, sometimes they don't necessarily have to be opposites so much as separate, right? The needs of, my needs versus the needs of others, they're not necessarily opposite things. And like you said, sometimes they coincide and sometimes they go against each other, but they are they are separate, and it's that separateness that causes us to have to reevaluate them and sort of take a wider perspective. The other part of it is, you know, how the way we interact with these things, we try to label them, and I think that labeling is a duality in itself, right? When you say somebody is an addict, right? It's a sort of universally negative thing to say. But I also am an addict, right? Like I go to school, right? And I just go to school for fun, and so I take class after class, and in between semesters, I find myself getting really anxious, really, kind of depressed, kind of, so maybe that's an unhealthy connection to something, even though that thing itself is sort of growth oriented, right? So, like you said, I think that the duality, saying that something is good or something is bad, I think that automatically puts us at a disadvantage. Like you're saying, there has to be some sort of integration. There has to be some sort of perspective that allows you to say, what can I take from these two things and put them together in order to create a sort of healthy attitude or way of behaving. Is that right?
Absolutely. When you said that, this showed up for me. I had a lot of bias about living what I used to call uselessly to the end while I'm not contributing and I'm not even enjoying. And so therefore, working maybe with my clients or somebody who had a very, very elderly parent, or even when I have had my elderly parent, at one point, I kept finding myself saying, like, if I ever get there, please, 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 I'm going to go. I'm not going to do this. And, I voted for palliative care and all of those end of life, choices. And I read this book, and I actually have this person on my podcast, and it was like fascinating, which they had gone to 3 different locations where like nursing homes where people who at the end of their life were living there. And the beauty was that because there's no expectation, and every day they wake up as if like, I won today. One more day, I won to be in this human body and experience that they were so joyous. Although I might have not experienced that joy outside based on only my assumption. But interestingly enough, the person with their own duality about facing death, every day they woke up, it was like, I won one more day. And it was this awesome level of looking at the duality that we have, which is this concept of anxiety about death, this powerlessness that we have. And then suddenly each day, although they're not necessarily doing something to get it, but when they get it, it's as if I won the lottery.
Yeah, I think death is a really good example because, like you mentioned, if we just break it down to like government or legislational viewpoints, then it really becomes this black and white thing, right? Oh, should people be allowed to choose when they want to die, or is that always wrong? But that's way too black and white, right? Everybody has a different relationship. There might be some people who are, somebody who's 100 years old who isn't ready to die, right? Whereas one thing I always tell my friends and family is, I'm 34, but it seems like I've been alive for a really long time, and I've had a really good life. So if I were to die tomorrow, I wouldn't be sad. Like I'm glad for every day that I get from here on out. But if somebody were to break the news to me tomorrow that, hey, you know what, you've got 6 months to live, I feel like I've lived a pretty good life. Like I don't feel very afraid of death, So it's just something that is very unique to each person's circumstance and their previous life experiences and their expectations, for things. And I think that, again, it's just that relationship, looking at how people are in, viewing these different things that have happened in their life really impacts what sort of power or sway a duality has in their lives. What are some examples of dualities that are are big in psychology or big to your theory?
Well, in awareness integration, we're actually consistently looking at the different parts of you between the dualities of you, what we have about our assigned positive, beliefs and thoughts, and the assigned negative ones, and how you create emotions based on those thought processes, and how do you associate. So one of the conversations that I've always had with addiction is that we associate something that is really harmful for us to absolutely utter pleasure, and it's really our association, and it's like a fantasy you create for yourself, which is very different than reality. And I think a lot of or dualities is between these fantasies. Human beings are probably, I could say, the only species that we live on our fantasies as if it's reality. And we take reality and twist it in a narrative construct, with most of the narration is a movie we create, and with a lot of fantasy. And a lot of times when reality keeps shoving itself in our face, the duality is, no, I insist on my own fantasy. I insist. And I think that's where partly what we do with, the awareness integration is consistently looking at my thought process, my emotion process. How am I behaving? What kind of results and impacts am I creating? How am I assuming if we are the only species that we live basically based on our assumptions? People do things and we just come up with these stories about them, and come up with the stories about how they think of us and how they feel about us. And then they do something and we create this narration and we take it really personal. And, we live like this a whole lifetime and never check. Right? Like, never check. I've actually asked my clients or myself, like, oh, you've had this elaborate assumption. Have you ever checked? Is it true? No, I can't. And even if I tell them, they'll lie to me. And but don't you want to hear it from the horse's mouth? No, I don't believe them. But you believe yourself in your assumptions of, what you think other people think of you. But and then it's funny, because even if I ask somebody to go talk to your family and friends and ask them how they think about you, and they'll come back with this elaborate, beautiful list. And then I say, well, can you take that in? No, I'm still bad. So that's a narrative that the person has created as a fantasy to themselves, and they're not willing to let it go. Although when they check with reality of, how do people think of them, mostly is pretty good. Like, there's a solidness of the characters that are amazing. So it's this type of a duality that we consistently live throughout the day. Throughout the day, you're living with this. The duality between what can I control and what can't. And we insist on trying to control things that is just not up to us. How many times we go into the place of getting pissed at people of why are they the way they are, and they should be another way, and I'm the one who's going to tell them how they should be and how they should act. And, why do they think that way? And we now, get involved in social media and yell at each other for being different than each other, So you could watch this duality from the minute you wake up in the morning toward everything. I remember, Joel, one day I woke up. I was going to a class, and they had this assignment, and it was all about like this concept of you wanting to hold on and control these aspects, and thinking that you're really, really in control. And the radio went on for the alarm, and I realized I have no idea what's in that radio. I don't know what that radio is. I don't know anything about the waves. I don't know who's going to be on it, who's going to be talking, how does it even is made, what is the technology of it. And I thought, well, why did I buy this? Well, it had one function, which was going to wake me up, and it was going to give me music, and it looked cute. That's it. I mean, those are the three conditions that got me to the purchase it. Then I was laying down and I'm like, this mattress, I have no idea what's in it. Who made it? Why was it? It's just I bought it because it was firm enough. And then I looked at the drapes and I looked at the walls and I looked at all of that. Then I went into the bathroom and, I'm taking a shower and I'm like, what's in this water? I have no idea what's in this water. How did they fix it? I just knew it's water. And I went through the day, Joel, looking at, I pretty much knew 0.00001% of the things that were around me that I even thought I had the choice of. I purchased this. I purchased this house. I purchased this mattress. I'm the one who did it. And when I look at it, I'm like, that's interesting. There's so many aspects that I have no control. And I pretend going around the world, I made it to 61 years and a half. And yet with so much I have no clue about, and I'm running life pretty good.
Yeah. We talk about that on the show once in a while. We call it's the illusion, explanatory illusion, right? Which is this idea that, like you said, we go around thinking that we're just masters of our domain, right? Like, oh, okay, well, hey, I built this computer that I'm recording us on, right? So I think that I know stuff about computers, but I don't know. Like you said, where do they get the silicone for the microchips? Where do they get all this stuff? No idea, right? And that can extend even beyond materialistic things. I know with philosophy, lots of times, what you find is that humans, one of our defining characteristics is language. And that's the way that we, conceptualize these sort of abstract ideas. But all of a sudden you start looking at a word and you go, where did that word come from? What does that mean? Right. And you start going back and you realize, at some point, this is just something that's made up, right? It's just a symbol. But yeah, it's this illusion of explanatory depth, our inability to really, we know nothing about anything, right? At some point.
It isn't the duality of going back and forth between then what we know and what we don't know, and how do we bring down this anxiety of the unknown consistently by itself is a duality, and coming to terms in trying to figure out, all right, I know, even if it's 1.0001%, can I hold on to that and say, okay, I can bring my anxiety to at least see what is it that I can do? What are the power that I do have? What is the impact I want to create? What is my intention and how can I create that intention? So it's this duality of, is it me or is it, determinism? Do I have free will or I not? Which is a huge philosophical conversation, which is, yeah, it could be that I don't have free will, but I do have small choices within the construct of where I'm, where I am. Right? Like I don't have free will of me changing to a dog right now, but I do have it that if I'm a human being with this construct at this age, these are my limitations or these are my structure. And within the structure, what are some of the behaviors that I can do with some intentionality that I have? And I think that by itself can integrate what we were talking about, the dualities a little bit.
Yeah, I think that, the big step there is reframing perspective, right? Because the name of this podcast is From Nowhere to Nothing. The reason it's named that, well, it's a quote from a philosopher talking about how philosophy is a road from nowhere to nothing. Basically meaning, you look at these topics and like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it doesn't matter what it is, God and time or Disney princesses, right? You start looking at them and if you keep asking questions and you keep going back and you keep, wondering where the things came from, you never find out. There really aren't any answers. And so really you can have one or two reactions to it, right? It's a duality in itself where you can say, well, I don't know if there's a God or not. And that really scares me because, what happens after I die or what happens here? Or you can just let that kind of fascinate you, right? And that's the boat that I'm in is I've gotten to the point where I really like not knowing. Like I like the mystery of things, and it gives you the ability to continue probing and stuff. But yeah, perspective in any parts of our life, like you were saying earlier, because of our consciousness and our language, we're able to create these narratives. about other people or about our own lives and things. And very often, just being able to shift your perspective is enough to change your reality about the way that these things kind of play out. There was a study just recently where, they were asking people, I think they put them on a train, and they had half the people say, "Hey, just behave how you want," and then they had half the people, and they said, um, "You have to talk to the stranger across from you in the car, right?" And so the half that they just told, "Do whatever you want," they didn't interact with the stranger at all. But the other half that they said, "Hey, listen, you have to engage this person in conversation," they did. And going into it, everybody thought that they would have these terrible interactions, that they'd be bothering the person, that the person would be unpleasant, all this sort of stuff. But they found that almost universally, anybody who started up a conversation with a stranger had a really good time. They talked to them, because that's just part of that narrative, right? People are people just like us, right? So if you start having a conversation with a stranger, there's a good chance that you'll have something in common because you're both people. But our inborn sort of bias is that, oh, if this is a stranger, I want to steer clear of them. I'm gonna bother them, or they're gonna be unpleasant or something, right? It's that narrative, and it's interesting how widespread it is. Um, so do dualities, right? Do these split situations, do they actually exist, or are they just sort of helpful conceptual tools for our brains to categorize things around us?
I mean, when I look at nature, I think that it changes, and with that change, in one essence, it brings the duality. So I do think it exists. Obviously, uh, we create more complex one because of the frontal cortex that we've grown. But you look at the same land that goes through different types of natural changes. It does go through their own duality. Or even when you look at the animal world, like if you are an animal in the wild, every morning that when the light shows up, you got to find food. And how do you do that? And how do you survive? And you're going to be either eaten or eat something. Or how do you create territory? So I think it is the way that we as human beings create more complex at it. I think is because of the self that gets created with different narratives that now wants to deal with different elements, and so it adds to the duality, let's say. So there's some there already, and then we add to it consistently. And then I would assume that as you grow to beyond a certain point, as you're going down, let's say down the hill, um, then you might want to integrate more, um, and make life less complex. So it could be like as a child, it's less complex. Then we keep making it more complex as you are an adult, and then wanting to find to be in different roles, not only because of survival, but because of survival of your identity, being in a society. You create all of these pieces, which is just going to add to your dualities. And then from the other side, you keep going down and completing your dualities and becoming integrated, and finally, it's almost like shedding these different pieces so that you can become like your innocent whole, the soul of it, and then say goodbye and move on. That's how I look at it, whether it's real or not. What we create internally appears to be real. However, just like you mentioned beautifully, which is there's just different stories. Like when you were talking about God, I've worked a lot with people where it's like if you have one that is very personal to you and it comes at your support, well, awesome. Like, keep it. What's the issue? And if we have one that puts guilt on you, it's watching you and scolding you, and then like, well, God, why did you give me cancer? And you did this and you did that. I'm like, maybe we need to change the narrative, and the God you created is not beneficial to you, because it's like, you've created a monster out of that. And then, all right, maybe we could change the narrative on this one, and hold the one that you created again in your head, which is this beautiful, nurturing image of it being. Now, is it real or not? I don't know, but it's certainly real for people.
Yeah.
And, if it's real for you, then the point is, how are you utilizing it?
Right. Yeah. And that's where, thinking about it, philosophy versus psychology, it's kind of interesting, right? Because in philosophy, we think about this concept a lot, which is kind of continuity versus discontinuity, right? Heraclitus said, you never step in the same river twice, because, even though the river might be a whole, you step in it and all the water that's in the river is different water than what was there before. So this idea of a river being a separate thing from the land or from these other things, it's really sort of illusory, right? Or, this, these, all of these different things are present in philosophy. Or with God, right? You look at God and you say, okay, well, there's definitely certain things that we experience in reality that cannot be explained scientifically. So then you say, well, is it just stuff that could be explained scientifically, but we don't have the scientific tools or methods to explain it? Or is it, a god or an alien simulation or whatever you want to believe, right? There's no way of knowing. So it's this idea of there being dualities in reality from a philosophical view is sort of complicated, but from a psychological point of view, it's a little bit more clear cut, right? Like you were saying, rather than thinking about reality, we're thinking about our personal perspective of reality, the narrative that we create about it. And in the narratives, for sure, there's things that are separate from other things. That's the way our brains work, is to categorize things and create these distinct separations, even if they don't really exist in reality. And then we form attitudes and stories about
that. That piece creates suffering.
Right.
The personal angle that it's like, from that we look at from a psychological perspective, is because there's a piece that creates agony and misery, or in a bigger philosophy, we're not looking at it from a personal perspective. So the emotional factor doesn't show up. And then yet when you become a human being who's looking at the bigger picture, but somehow relates to that bigger picture, now the relationship becomes a narrative that can either create misery or agony, or create comfort and peacefulness and love and unity. And I think those are, again, the duality of what is and how am I relating to it? Because I don't think human being can survive. It doesn't exist without relating to something. Like, let's take a human being and put him in four white walls. What happens after a while? They'll create their own reality. They'll be completely psychotic. They'll imagine people or things outside of them, and then they'll relate to it.
Yeah.
So don't exist without relation. So whatever you see out there, we're going to relate to it.
Yeah,
or it doesn't exist.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I read about was there's I think it's Microsoft. There's some company that has the quietest room in the world where they test out different equipment and things. And there's been a few people that have had the ability to kind of go in there and just see what it's like. And the longest anybody's ever stayed in there is 56 minutes, because they just get unnerved just from it being so quiet. You can hear the blood rushing in your ears, and you can hear all this stuff, and it will just drive you crazy. Like you were saying, solitary confinement in prison, right? They've shown that people who have been exposed to this for extended periods of time, they tend to have psychotic breaks. So yeah, it just goes to show we like to think of our brains as being this tabula rasa, right? This neutral, objective thing, but it's really not. We have our own subjective experiences, our own past learning, But even beyond that, just the hardware of the human brain is, wired to perceive and to make sense of things a certain way, and that can work for us or against us.
Absolutely.
Do you think that so we've talked about dualities and how they can kind of be harmful. Um, do you think that there's any positive aspects to having a dualistic thinking like that?
I do. I think that it expands us. It takes away from limitation because you can look at things from so many different angles and have different needs and different desires. And, like when we talk in couples and couples therapy, it's two people with completely different desires. And, we put ourselves into a position of actually committing ourselves to living with another human being. And for what? Mostly to expand, So I do think duality has a lot of benefit because it would be very, very one-sided if I only stuck to one story, which I probably created between 0 and 7 years of age, and just kind of like got caught in it. And never opened myself to any other information, because if you are opening yourself in any type of information, um, it's going to be something different. So you're going to face duality immediately. And if you consistently say no, 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 it's going to be pretty dogmatic and very small. My world will be very small, and I won't fit in the bigger picture, because the bigger picture is moving along, it's growing, it's moving, it's shifting. So if I'm stuck, I'm the one who's stuck.
Right.
So I think duality is part of this growth, that you're consistently moving from one phase to another phase of life, from one experience to another experience. And that's like the transitional roads going from this bridge of duality. Now, sometimes, you just create too many roads and they're all there and you're fine. And sometimes you use it as a bridge. You go through the bridge and finally, land somewhere bigger or different.
Yeah, I think to bring a psychology word into it, it's this idea of cognitive dissonance, right? All of us experience that. We have a narrative. We have this idea of how something is. And that at some point during our lives, there's new information that's introduced that shows that what we believe just isn't true. And then we have a choice to make. Well, do I find a way to rationalize the fact that what I initially believed was right and that this new information is false and is wrong? Or do I accept that this new information is right and then find a way to integrate it into my prior beliefs and kind of head on a different path, And that's the struggle that everybody faces. And I think that that's something that people especially struggle with nowadays in the age of social media and kind of polarizing political environments and things, is they experience, they have this echo chamber, right, of people, whether it's online or in real life, that reflect their ideas. And then when somebody else comes in that doesn't share their ideas, or a piece of evidence emerges that goes against what they believed, it becomes very hard to accept that new information if you've been reinforcing the false information or your initial position so heavily beforehand, right? Is there an effective way of dealing with dualities that we face like that?
What I've tried to do, Joel, is to start looking at each one of them as an entity, and kind of look at the different angles of each one. What's the pros and the cons, let's say. And many times from a behavioral level, I've done, and I've asked my clients to just, do a running journal of, if this is the case, what's the pros and cons? And if this isn't the case, what's the pros and cons? And you kind of just allow this to flourish and brew and write and write and write until, when something is written in front of you, it's different because you visually also are seeing all angles of it. and to come to terms. And then that's where I think a lot of times you'll see that they have some similarities. And then, you come to terms with the similarities and you kind of like negotiate with the parts that are not very similar. Or at one point, when you keep writing and getting to know this, you'll get to see that you might have to really mourn and let go of one side and transfer yourself to another side completely until the next duality hits, right? We see that a lot between phases of life. In where is it that, one phase is completing and we got to go to another phase and we're in this duality, like singlehood to couplehood. There's this duality, couplehood to parenthood. There's this duality, and it's coming. You're the one who's choosing it, but it doesn't take away from, I just want the old stuff to still be there, which can't be in the new stuff. And then how can I integrate it and create all of those? And then what I said, like going into retirement and then, coming to terms with aging. So you could see this piece keeps coming. And then one aspect of it is grief. Let go. It's not coming back. Some things you can bargain with each other and integrate, and other parts are you can't bargain anymore, and you just got to say goodbye to the other side and have your sadness, have your cries, and again, the journaling and the writing really helps. But it's also this awareness that this is what's going on right now in my life, and I got to let it go and enter this new phase. Now, the new phase itself might have its own dualities, and then we could, see if this set now we could be negotiated somehow. That's it.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about sort of how humans, our thinking is not objective, right? Just the way our brains are wired is not objective. Part of that is that we tend to look on the past as being more rosy or more favorable than it actually was. And we tend to look at the future as being more scary or more negative than it really has the potential to be. So I think that might be some of the ways that these dualities or some of these negative behaviors emerge is, we're doing something and we have this history of doing something, we become comfortable doing it. And so we think of it as something that is positive. We reflect and we say, oh, I've been doing this for this long and it's been great, right? And then you think about changing, and you look into the future and you think, oh, well, that's going to be too hard. It's too scary, right? But that's
some of the research, Joel. Actually, some of the research of forecasting has really come to the term of whatever state you are today, and that's pretty much what you forecast, which has nothing to do again with what reality is, because that's all you could forecast. You could only forecast. Either you're going to take the past and kind of like shoot it into the image of the future, or you're just going to take what your present moment is and shoot it into the future. And I think part of the survival game is like what you said is, I'm going to shoot some negative things into the future just to be aware, so that I can be alert and aware and not doing the mistakes that I did before, or not to get hurt. And so definitely some part of our survival sends some, detrimental, negative stuff into the future, just not to be at ease completely and let go of my defenses, because I need my defenses to survive.
Yeah, I actually just read a new article that I was doing an article review on for the course I'm currently taking. And it was interesting because it was looking at prospective memories versus autobiographical memories. So autobiographical memories, that's what we typically think of as memories, right? Something that happened in the past that we're reflecting on. And prospective memories are us thinking about something that's going to happen in the future. And so they measured a bunch of people across a bunch of different ages to see what the results were. And what they found out was that older people had more prospective memories than younger people, which went against what they hypothesized, because they figured based off of the temporal location that people inhabit, you'd think that if you were younger, you had less time behind you to reflect on things you had done, but you had more time ahead of you to look at things that would happen. And if you were older, this situation would be reversed. So they expected the older people who had less, less life ahead of them to have less prospective memories, but they found just the opposite. Older people were thinking about the future much more than younger people. But the interesting part about the study to me was that when they looked at how these memories sort of correlated, they found that there wasn't people who had more autobiographical memories or more prospective memories. Rather, people who had more of one also had more of the other. So what that sort of means in layman's terms is that there are some people who, if you don't think about the past, you really don't think about the future. But if you do think about the past a lot, you also think about the future a lot. And they said that this is a person's way of using the past to inform the future. So they said there was just two distinct types of people that emerged from the group. Those who were just sort of living in a present moment, and those who thought a lot about the past and then also thought a lot about the future. I thought that was really interesting. Which group of people do you think would have more issues with duality? That the person who's living in that moment, or the person who's thinking more about the past and more about the future?
I would assume different tenses that it would create that. It's very hard to just live in the present moment. I think Philip Zimbardo has an amazing theory, and he has a book about how people, even that is a duality of how we split the past into positive and negative memories. And we split the future into positive and negative. And even we split even the present moment into positive and negative. And if you are a person who tends to do one more than the other, whether you're a past negative person, which more time during the day you kind of like hover around that, it makes you more of a depressed person. If you're looking at a negative future consistently, it makes you more of an anxious person. If you're looking at more of the past, the positive past, and you kind of like ruminate, and you lose the perspective of the concepts that are in the present moment for you, and you don't necessarily look at the future because you're kind of fulfilled with the past. So you're not necessarily moving along life or creating goals or goal oriented and all of it. People who are usually creating, positive aspects, those are the kind of like A personalities, which are consistently, come on, let's go, let's create, move to, and anything positive, anything negative that happens, it's like, it's just an obstacle, let's move forward, So you can see, or the people who are just, don't worry about it. It's like a present moment, hedonistic, all is good. Let's just get high and enjoy the moment. Let's get some mushroom and LSD and let's look at this rose and just experience the rose. And the ones who are in the present moment and consistently in the negative, they're just miserable at every time. They look at everything and during the day and they're fighting with it. So you could see there, we all live in all of it, but somehow we get to train our brain to take one of these temporal things and then, add the positive and negative and kind of live in that mode. And our job really as a therapist to be able to see that and kind of flow it where all six, the past, present, and future, and all of it in both the negative and the positive, it gets a little bit more balanced.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's great. Is there anything else you want to mention about dualities before we tie up the show? Is there anything that we didn't cover?
I mean, I think to wrap it up, it would be more like, it's going to be here. It is here. Might as well look for it and enjoy it, learn from it, integrate what you can, because it is. It just is.
Yeah. I think that that's something that carries over into everyday life, is just perspective, right? If I find myself reacting in a strong emotional way to something, whether it's positive or negative, just asking myself, why am I having this reaction to this thing, and sort of rationalizing it. Um, all right. Do you want to tell the listeners again just about what you have going on? And
Yes. Go to Foojan.com, Foojan.com, and that is for the app. Get the app from your Apple Store, or for Android, go, Google. My website is FoojanZeine.com. So you can see all that I do. And if you're interested, if you're a coach or a therapist and want to be certified in awareness integration theory, go to awarenessintegration.com. So all those three websites are available for different things. And I just love to hear from people. The books are out there. One is for, as a self-help, is Life Reset. The one book is for coaches and therapists called Awareness Integration Therapy, and another one is called Intentional Parenting, which is we take every single age group and talk about their different developmental stages, and then we bring awareness integration and how to deal with those stages, as they move forward. So they're all available for whomever's listening and feels like, oh, I fit with this, and they're interested in it.
All right. Dr. Zeine, thanks for being on. It was a great talk. And until next time, keep pondering.